Okay, good afternoon everybody. This is the last recap video that we're going to do for the poems that we've already studied. So the next video we are going to be going through the extract from the Prelude by Wordsworth. Just a really quick reminder that you must make sure that you've got all of the full annotations for the 4 poems that we did at the end of last term, because on Monday, when you're scheduled to have a lesson, I will be going through how to do the answer and how to model how to do a comparative essay answer, and then you'll have your own planning sheets complete, and then you'll have your own piece of work, and that will count as your submitted piece that you need to get through to me next week. So do make sure that you've caught up to date with all of these poems. Let's get going.
Okay, so within Extract from the Prelude by William Wordsworth, it's important to note that this is another poem by one of the Romantic poets. So similar to Shelley, the Romantic poets, they believed in the ultimate power of nature, and they believed in the sort of transcending power of nature as well. The idea that it was actually more powerful than humans, and had this sort of ultimate beauty. What we've got to be aware of then, go straight into this poem, is that this is a first-person narrative. Sounds like a first-person account. Now, it describes a turning point in the poet's life. This is quite an autobiographical poem from Wordsworth, and he describes a time where things changed for him. Within this poem, you need to note the use of blank verse, which makes it sound serious and important, like this is something that we've really got to pay attention to. And the regular rhythm within the poem makes it sound like natural speech, so it sounds like a very natural account of what happened to Wordsworth here. So they're what's in it, and you've got to say about why they're important. There are 3 distinct sections to this poem. There is the setup of what happens, there is then a climax, and then there's a reflection. So it's quite story-like in its sort of pattern and its structure. When we go on to talk about Freytag's pyramid, when we come on to the language papers, it does mirror that kind of structure, that story arc as it would go through. So it starts off, one summer evening, led by her. Now, we've got here this parenthesis, and we've got led by her. Wordsworth suggests that he's been led by a female into whatever he does, which we will later find out. Led by her. Now, her is nature. So here, straight off, nature is personified. You want to note the verb led. Where someone is led, there is kind of like a master-follower relationship. Let's just pop that there. This master-follower relationship that occurs between man and nature, the idea that man follows the nature. It also helps to show you the power of nature, and the idea that this powerful nature, this female body of nature, inspires him to act in a certain way. I found a little boat tied to a willow tree within a rocky cove, its usual home. Straight, I unloosened her chain, and stepping in, pushed from the shore. So again, personifies the boat as female. He finds this little boat. It was an act of stealth and troubled pleasure. Troubled pleasure is one of the key quotations on your knowledge organiser. What technique is it? Oh, there you go. I'm sure everybody said it's an oxymoron out loud, just like in lessons, which is beautiful. So we've got this troubled pleasure, an act of stealth. This makes us aware that Wordsworth knows that he shouldn't be doing this. To be stealthy is kind of to be hidden away. If you go into stealth mode, you're kind of sneaking around. So we've got this idea that he knows he shouldn't be doing it. Which begs the question, if he knows he shouldn't be doing this, why is he doing it? Is it because nature is so powerful, he almost falls under its spell, which would fit with really what the Romantics thought, that nature had this mesmerising quality about it. With troubled pleasure. Now, the oxymoron, you cannot just say, and I've said this time and time again, you cannot just say Wordsworth employs the oxymoron troubled pleasure to show how he felt at the time. Because I'm going to be saying to you, well, how did he feel at the time? Why do you know he felt that at the time? So I would be thinking about the fact that Wordsworth employs the oxymorons to reflect the conflict between human and the natural worlds. So just bear that in mind, because you're going to need to say why. So it reflects the conflict between human and natural worlds. Okay, so you've got that there. Nor without the voice of mountain echoes did my boat move on, leaving behind her still on either side small circles glittering idly in the moon until they melted all into one track of sparkling light. You've got quite a lot of this repeated L sounds here. They're not vowels, they are consonants, but they're not harsh consonant sounds like we've had before. They're not your sort of C sounds, your really aggressive sounds. Instead, they sound quite soft, they sound quite gentle, idly still, leaving small circles glittered idly. It might reflect the gentle sound of the boat, the fact that at this point nature is not threatening. So the sounds, I'm sure there must be a technique for that as well, so I might look it up, but if anybody knows it, just let me know. So sounds reflect the gentle movement of the boat. And you must be able to note that nature is calm here. At this point, nature doesn't pose a threat to the young Wordsworth at all. It's just quite a sort of nice sense of calm here. He then says, but now, but. Whenever we've got this caesura right in the middle here, and then we've got this connective, this but now. It always signifies a turning point when you've got a connective in the middle of a line like that. So, but now, like one who rose, proud of his skill, to reach a chosen point with an unswerving line, I fix my view upon the summit of a craggy ridge, the horizon's utmost boundary. Far above was nothing but stars and the grey sky. Here, he's proud of his skill, feels confident here. Be aware that this is a young boy who has stolen a boat from this little cove, and now he's rowing out in the night. It's obviously night time because it talks about the grey sky and the stars are out. It makes it sound really quite beautiful, doesn't it? Nothing but the stars. And it says the grey sky. It's not black. It's not dark here. It's just sort of maybe this dusk time, that time between the day and the night. But the stars are already out, which is usually people might use the stars to navigate within nature. So, she was an elfin pinnace. This is interesting here. She was an elfin pinnace. It's a metaphor of the fairy boat. It makes the scene seem magical and non-threatening. Metaphor. This fairy boat. This idea that nature is magical. Powers beyond man, maybe. You've got to be thinking when you're talking about things having magical qualities that magic can be used for good and bad. So whilst magic can be seen to mesmerise and enchant and be really beautiful, at some points it can turn really, really quickly, and I think that's what Wordsworth does try to show us within this poem. So, lustily, I dipped my oars into the silent lake. It's an interesting adverb, lustily, when you're full of lust, full of passion. So he's obviously passionate about what he's doing. Lustily, I dipped my oars into the silent lake. And as I rose upon the stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan. He obviously feels like he's doing really well here. He feels really confident. It's silent. There's no one disturbing him. He's clearly aware that he's here on his own. Went heaving through the water like a swan. You've got this contrast here. This water like a swan. The idea of a swan is very graceful. A swan is a royal bird. And swans look very calm, very, very peaceful. But if you've ever seen a swan when they turn nasty, then they can attack quite quickly and they can turn. So maybe this swan actually reflects what nature's going to be like for the young Wordsworth, that at one point it seems very, very graceful, but it can take a swift turn for the worst. The idea of the verb heaving being used here as well, like it's a struggle, it's hard work. When from behind that craggy steep, till then the horizon's bound, a huge peak, black and huge, as if with voluntary power instinct, upreared its head. Now, this might feel a bit strange here, but all of a sudden the mountain is personified. A huge peak, black and huge, as if with voluntary power instinct, upreared its head. You've got a metaphor. And all of a sudden, it's as if the mountain or nature comes to life. The mountain comes to life, but it doesn't come to life in this sort of magical fairy way. It becomes much more darker and much more threatening. So darker and threatening is what we've got here. And the idea here is if with voluntary power instinct upreared its head. Whilst we might say, you know, it's personification, I wonder actually whether this could be another example morphism, or zoomorphism, if you prefer that. This actually feels like a bit of a beast, which is why I would go with that with the anthro. Doesn't feel like a human. All of a sudden, this dark, threatening mountain or thing comes to life to uprear its head. If you think about animals, or you think about beasts, like mythical beasts, they might uprear their heads when they get angry. They sort of lie dormant, and then all of a sudden they tower above people. And I feel like this is what Wordsworth is describing to us here. The boy is talking again here about what he's done. I struck and struck again, like he's trying to fight back. It feels like he's in a panic here. He's gone from being very calm, he rose proud of his skill, to having to strike against an enemy. I struck and struck again, and growing still in stature, the grim shape towered up between me and the stars, and still, for so it seemed, with purpose of its own and measured motion, like a living thing, strode after me. So we've got here the fear shown, the idea that he feels like he has to fight back, that he's almost attacking it. A grim shape, to be miserable, to be quite frightening, and then you've got that really strong metaphor here as well. Whether you might want to go with one of these, or you might want to go personification. They're all types of metaphor. Doesn't matter which one you use, but you've got to be able to say why you're saying it. So if you're going to say it's personification, then you're giving it human qualities. If you want to say zoomorphism, then you're obviously thinking that nature becomes like an animal here. Anthro, you probably use if you're going to say that it becomes almost like a mythical beast. Okay, strode after me. To stride is like a human walk, but you might think that animals or beasts might stride as well. With trembling oars, I turned, and through the silent waters stole my way back to the covert of the willow tree. Look here, I stole my way. The verb here. He doesn't just he doesn't say that he just rose back. I stole my way. All of these ideas that, you know, he's untied the boat at the top. He is an act of stealth, and now he stole it. All of these things are forbidden. And I wonder if Wordsworth describes this act or this episode as if, because he knows that he's done something wrong, he's done something that he shouldn't, nature punishes him by turning on him. Or maybe it is Wordsworth's guilt and the power of the human imagination as a result of guilt that makes him think that the mountains are moving, and he self-punishes for even trying to sort of commit this crime which involves nature, makes nature implicit in it. There's a couple of readings there that you could talk about. Okay, so we come back then, and when we talked about the three parts at the start, this is the end, this is the resolution. So we've had the climax where the mountain strides after him, and we have this resolution here. Back to the covert of the willow tree. There in her mooring place I left my bark, and through the meadows homeward went in grave and serious mood. But after I had seen that spectacle here, something to look at, something to be awed by, for many days my brain worked with a dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being. Over my thoughts there hung a darkness. Call it solitude or blank desertion. No familiar shapes remained. That's the one from the Knowledge Organiser. No pleasant images of trees, of sea or sky, no colours of green fields, but huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men, move slowly through the mind by day, and were a trouble to my dreams. And again, you've got quite a lot of juxtaposed ideas. A trouble to my dreams. They should be pleasant, but actually Wordsworth describes this nightmarish experience. He talks about a spectacle. We know what a spectacle is. That idea of awe that the Romantic poets so commonly talked about, that I know that you've done. There hung a darkness, and we go back to this sort of idea of fear. No familiar shapes remained. I think that this is Wordsworth's way of saying that he is struggling to describe it, struggles to articulate, and nothing is familiar anymore. The idea that nothing is familiar, everything has changed as a result of this conflict. Everything has changed here. And it feels like this is an episode that will stay with Wordsworth for a really long time, and we feel quite sorry for the boy towards the end. So do make sure that you've got all of the annotations here, and that you're completely confident with how Extract from the Prelude would link with Storm on the Island, My Last Duchess, and Ozymandias. I had to think then which the other one was, and Ozymandias, especially this in terms of the power of nature.